If any of you are watching this, I know that if you are a Charles Oliveira fan, this has to be disappointing. And for that, I am sorry, because Charles Oliveira is a credit to the fight game and one of the best fighters that I've covered, and his career has been remarkable. So this has to be a tough moment. But I am asking you to think logically right now. I am asking you to think rationally right now. If you are asking me, what was it like when at light heavyweight, John Jones was on the come up and beating everyone? It was like that. Now, this doesn't have the same fanfare of Conor McGregor and the stakes and the size and the spectacle, and it doesn't have that. I'm not saying it's the same. But if you're wondering what it was like, if you maybe missed McGregor in the 2010s when he was coming up and making these insane proclamations and then just delivering on them, it was like that, right? You are looking at, with Ilia Topuria, it doesn't even matter what happens from here. Now, of course, for other reasons, it would matter later. But what I'm about to say is true. This is one of the most special fighters I have ever covered. This, to me, has some parts of McGregor's rise. This, to me, has some parts of John Jones's rise. What he is doing right now is going to stand, or excuse me, it's going to stand the test of time. You are witnessing MMA history with this guy. It's not hyperbole anymore. It's not exaggeration anymore. It's not boosterism anymore. It's not all Luke loves this guy anymore. It's not any of those things. This is one of the most special fighters I've ever seen. Now, I'm not putting him at, the top just yet. But this shit he's doing, this is what the greats did on their way up. Some, less evenly in different ways. But it's like this. What he's doing is on par with early championship run, or even better maybe, than John Jones or Conor McGregor or Khabib, or you fucking name it. That's what he is. That's what he represents. That's what he's doing. I need everyone to understand the historical significance of what this guy is and who he is. He is now beginning to not just chase, lightweight greats of all time or whatever. He's chasing the Mount Rushmore guys. He's not there yet. But that's the trajectory he's on. Now, again, I'm not saying he's going to get there. There's a lot that could happen, but everything he's done up to this point is one of the most special runs. From fight 1 to fight 17, who has a better run than this? Second title, up a weight class, icing a pound-for-pound guy in Volkanovski, icing a guy who was a former champion and was a BMF champion at that time and also a former pound-for-pound guy himself, icing Charles Oliveira, a former champion, up a fucking weight class, and doing it inside of 2.5 minutes. Like it's nothing. The only person capable of doing something like that is a next-level generational talent. There's no debate anymore. He didn't get lucky against Volk. He didn't get lucky against Max. He didn't get lucky against Oliveira. He iced him because he's just way better. You need to see it clearly for what it is. And if the sport has any sense, you also have to recognize this is the most important fighter right now in the entire sport. Now, Tom Aspinall, he doesn't have the same division, but he might start doing some shit. And what Pantoja is doing is fucking incredible. Don't misunderstand me. Other guys are doing special shit too. But that run that Pantoja is on, that run that Topuria is on right now is history in the making. I have been watching this sport a very long time. GSP's early run was not quite like this. He lost to Matt Hughes getting armbarred in his first, bump up the title fight, which was a little early, but you get the idea. Anderson got heel hooked by Rio Chonin before he ever got to UFC. John's record, he had the blemish against, early that 12-6 elbow that shouldn't have counted, but that aside. But that's what this is. This is a run people will talk about for years to come. So I know that right now, if you're an Oliveira fan, this is a bitter pill to swallow. But you have to know, and you have to recognize, and you have to be aware that for the bitterness that you might be feeling about that, the consolation prize is, congratulations, you get to be witness to one of the most special rises I've ever seen. Ilia Topuria is as special a fighter as I've ever seen. Right? In the upper tier of upper tiers in terms of what he's done. If the sport has, as I indicated, any sense, they'll recognize that he should be made the face of it. All promotional effort should be put behind what he is doing. Now, of course, there's other guys, as I mentioned, Islam, Pantoja, Merab. We'll see what Tom Aspinall can do. Those guys are all fucking awesome too, and they might end up surpassing him if events go. But all promotional effort should be put behind Ilia Topuria. Because I got to tell you, when he goes, I have no earthly idea who's going to replace somebody like that. And I want to say it one more time. I said it before we started the post-fight show, but I'm going to repeat it here. For all the fucking jamokes who had the balls to say, oh, he only beat Volk because Volk came in on short notice. Well, not short notice, but too short of a turnaround after losing to Islam. It wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. He was going to go down either way. Oh, he beat Max and, Max was drained and whatever fucking excuse they want. It wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. And I know what some folks are going to try and say. They're going to say, well, Charles was over the hill and blah, blah. They're going to try. They're going to try. He went neck and neck with Chandler a little bit. Oh, he was destined to get hit. He gets hit a lot. Oh, da, da, da. I had people asking me, are there people sleeping on Charles and blah, 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 all this shit. It was never going to matter. Give me the very best version of Oliveira. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. He was going to get iced either way. He's going to send these dudes out looking at the lights every single time. He's that fucking good. He's that dangerous. He's that full of self-belief. And he's that unique. Everyone should be using this moment as a cause for celebration. We should not be reluctant about embracing somebody who's doing things like that in the octagon. We should be elated, excited for all the belly aching, which I've done plenty, more than my fair share probably, about the state of the sport and this and that. This is, if not the antidote, certainly quite the soother. Because somebody is doing this at this moment in time in a way that is so like, you take him out of the sport, who's going to do that at any weight class where the competition's that tough? Yeah, because Tom can lay everybody out at heavyweight, but the competition's not like this. These guys are all awesome. Okay, I hope everybody understands that. Make no mistake. Make no motherfucking mistake about it. You are watching a future great. You are watching history in motion. How do you know if something's historical? How do you know if something's special? It's a fair question because we don't have the same fanfare for Ilia that we had for McGregor. When McGregor was around at his peak, you knew. There was no guesswork. It was just so overwhelming, you could tell. Ilia hasn't gotten that yet. Partly by his own doing, partly by the nature of the circumstances. Not everybody can be McGregor as a rocket ship to the moon. But in terms of like doing things that are so far beyond the imagination of even what you think of the very best fighters, these guys don't come around very often. 28 years old this fucking kid is. 28 years old. And he's icing legends. Fight after fight after fight after fight. Pay some fucking respect. Okay, now let's talk about the fight itself. Oliveira, I did not think had a bad game plan. He did not look super. He looked like Oliveira. He had a couple of nice hard punches in the middle. But, I mean, you can't trade with this guy, not for very long, because that left hook, it appears, Charles Oliveira was bleeding real badly on the right-hand side. It appeared that left hook that he landed automatically opened him up. Now, that didn't necessarily, that wasn't the reason why ultimately Ilia won or lost, but you could just as evidence of, like, brothers and sisters, when Ilia Topuria balls up his fist, it's Armageddon. It's Armageddon when he balls up the fist. You can't trade with him, not for very long. You can't do it. Now, to Oliveira's credit, I thought he had a good idea about trying to, stay close to Oliveira, or long, depending on where he was, but staying close. He got double underhooks off of him. He was trying to take him down. He got reversed. Good takedown defense by Ilia. Great balance by him. Gets on top. Charles does Charles things. He had what was, I have to go back and look. He was outside. He reaped. It was trying to look for like almost outside ashy, but he reaped, turned. He turned Ilia, tried to go for, created some heel exposure, not a ton, but Ilia was basically able to get away. Charles stands, and then you all saw it. He puts a jab in his face. Charles wants to get something back. Ilia steps off the line. Here comes the right hand. He actually put one more jab in his face, but then the cross comes. He baited it, basically. That's what I'm trying to indicate. He baited it, gets his head off the line, hits him with the right hand, bah, and then closes the show with the left. It's Armageddon when he balls up the fist. I mean, what can you say? Let's go through Charles's record here, shall we? Let's go through Charles's record here. Let's look at this. So before this, he beats Chandler via decision, lost to Saryukian, which was very controversial, but he did lose. Ices Beneil Dariush inside of a round, lost to Islam. Now they're all the way back in 2022, and that was a very different kind of fight. Before that, submits Justin Gaethje, a fucking punishing striker. Submits Dustin Poirier, a punishing boxer. TKO's Michael Chandler, obviously, a wild card, but, a very heavy-handed guy and dangerous wrestler. Destroys a late stage Tony Ferguson. Guillotines Kevin Lee, KO's Jared Gordon, TKO's Nick Lentz, and then we go on down the list. Dude, this guy faced down basically the very best, and we didn't even get to his featherweight campaign, but has faced down the hardest, toughest, most battle-tested generation of lightweights I've ever seen. Justin Gaethje, a known punisher. As I mentioned, Dustin Poirier, a known punisher, and they couldn't do to him what Ilia made look effortless. That's who we're talking about here. One of one. By the way, I didn't even get to the fact that when he was on the ground, past the legs, Topuria did, gets to knee on belly, goes to mounted crucifix. Not mounted crucifix. I think it was crucifix from side. He didn't actually have it full on. No, I had to go back and look. I guess it was a mounted crucifix, because then he gets crossways with him. But anyway, goes for a crucifix on top. Obviously, Charles is going to squirm underneath and make that difficult. But like, it just it just underscores the kind of confidence and the kind of courage, athletic courage, that Topuria competes with, to go in like a guy like Charles who can do all of this. Now, again, once Charles started to get the leg entanglements working, we've seen it before. We saw against, hitting De La Riva inside, or reverse De La Riva on Chandler. And, we've seen the leg entanglements from Oliveira work as a way of, deterring guys, making them step back, creating back exposure, creating heel exposure. And you saw a lot of that there. I did not think it was necessarily all that wise for Topuria to play in that space. But nevertheless, it just goes to show he's got good submission defense, good scrambling, good wrestling, again, good balance, good top control, enough to at a bare minimum neutralize it, and then as well, threaten to some degree on there. But then he welcomes Charles back up and then just ices him basically within a matter of seconds thereafter. All the questions. Does Ilia Topuria's power carry? Well, he beat Jai Herbert. Well, he knocked out fucking Charles Oliveira. So to answer the question, does his power carry up to 55? Yes. Yes, it does. And it looked to me like some of the other ones, I'm not as convinced they translate up. In other words, the size differential when Charles has double underhooks, I could see Ilia getting pressed in a way that the guys at featherweight couldn't quite do to him. I do think that's going to be something to overcome for him against a guy like Arman, which we'll talk about, against a guy like Patty even, which we'll talk about. But, I could see some challenges there for him, depending on the opponent or the context in which the opponent wants to pursue the fight. So it's not like it's smooth sailing in every way, but like, John Jones had adversity, and all the greats had adversity and had to overcome it. It wasn't like they could just walk in there and do whatever they wanted at all times. They had to beat tough guys along the way. So these are challenges that I do think people are going to be right to note that there are some weaknesses along the way in terms of everything that we saw there. But Ilia Topuria is exactly who he said he was. And Ilia Topuria is exactly what Volk's fans, Max's fans, and Charles's fans feared the most. He's the motherfucking boogeyman. That's who he is. He is a Terminator sent back in time to terrorize all of your favorite fighters. That's who he is. And it's got to be tough to be somebody who, listen, all three of those guys that I just mentioned are eminently likable. Volk, impossible to hate. Max, impossible to hate. Charles, impossible to hate. Credits, all three of them. To the fight game, credits, all three of them. These are not guys that are getting arrested and getting in trouble and doing dumb shit. These are guys who are like a credit to the sport. It doesn't fucking matter. What did he say to Charles's face at the press conference this week? I'm sorry it had to be you. This motherfucker is looking at his opponents and expressing sorrow for what he's about to do to him. This is something you say to, like, in high school, if you're on the varsity, something you say to like somebody who doesn't even start on the JV squad. Like taking kind pity on them to their face. It's just the most ice cold thing you're ever going to see. It's as I indicated, you're watching the development of a career of somebody who's going to be an all-time great. That's what you're watching. That's exactly what you're looking at. And he's making other guys who are standard bearers of excellence in the sport look feeble. And if you didn't know anything about Volk and you didn't know anything about Max and you didn't know anything about Charles, you'd probably be like, all right, I mean, especially Max, that fight went to what, the middle of the third? You'd be like, all right, there's a little something to it. He's obviously a good fighter, but you would never understand. Like, it would never make sense to you that this guy's an all-time great. That guy's one of the best featherweight champions ever. This guy was you heard the crowd roar for Charles, and you saw what he did at lightweight. Like, these guys are great. You would never know that they're amazing fighters. It wouldn't even, you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell. If you didn't know anything about Charles Oliveira and tonight was the first fight you watched of him, you'd be like, that guy's good. Because that's what a guy like Ilia does to them. He just clowns them. He's just infinitely fucking better than them. And he's so dangerous with his boxing. Who's the best boxer in UFC? Well, it's a difficult question to answer. But who's the most dangerous boxer in UFC? It's Ilia Topuria. It's him. And clearly one of the most devastating punchers. Let's talk about that for a second. Pound for pound, he's one of the most, if not the most devastating puncher I've ever seen in MMA. Devastating puncher. Conor was a big puncher at 45. less of a puncher at 55, although still a very good one. But Conor had real good timing, real good range management, real good accuracy, and to a degree, obviously, Ilia's got a lot of those too. But just pure TNT. He's got to be one of the, if not the most, in terms of pound for pound. I mean, obviously, he's not going to be, harder than a puncher than Tom Aspinall or something. But pound for pound, that's a devastating puncher. So let's inventory this. He's 28. He's one of the most devastating punchers I've ever seen pound for pound. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He has very serviceable, if not good, wrestling. He's got appropriate aggression, and he wants all the smoke. What more do you want? What more do you want? And name another fighter that you can think of that's got all those characteristics. Conor's jiu-jitsu was good. It wasn't great. His wrestling was never that good. It was okay. And he put a little something into the Khabib fight. I give him credit. But it wasn't like this. His jiu-jitsu, was he a black belt? He might be one now, but he's not. He wasn't like at this stage of his career. And even if it was, like, his jiu-jitsu is not as good as his. And certainly pound for pound as a puncher, I don't know if I've ever seen another guy like this. This guy is special. You're like, oh, Luke, you've been glazing this fucking guy for 30 minutes. I just can't believe the amount of skepticism I have to hear about this guy. I cannot believe the amount of challenges to the obviousness of how good he is. I cannot believe the reluctance to embrace something so historically unusual in MMA. And I think that needs to end for the sport. It's in everyone's interest to rally around this guy. He can take us to another heightened place that I'm not sure anybody else in the game can. Now let's talk about what might be next, because you saw the face-off. First of all, the UFC did a face-off both in the main event and the co-main event. I'm assuming, obviously in the Josh Van and Pantoja case, that's a little bit more wrapped up and obvious. In this particular case, in the case of Ilia Topuria and Paddy Pimblett, there was a question you guys were asking in the chat. And of course, if you want to get a question in for the post-fight show, fire that into the super chat and we'll take a look at it. Also, I'm going to put this up here very quickly, if I may. Oop, wrong one. Hang on. This one. Tomorrow, we're going to have a breakdown of a bunch of stuff on my Substack. The only way to get it is to get on this QR code. But okay, let's talk about it here. What might be next? The UFC did those two face-offs, as I just indicated. In the case of Paddy, we didn't know who was going to get the title shot. Was it going to be Arman? Was it going to be Justin? Or was it going to be Paddy? You can make a case for just about all of them. Justin rebounded nicely. He's done a lot for the promotion. Fans like him. It'd be an interesting test. Who wouldn't want to see Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje? That'd be a cool-ass fight. You could have made the case for Arman. Arman was already supposed to fight Islam. Fell out, but he filled it on short notice for this one. I know Dana said he wasn't going to get it, blah, blah, blah. But you could at least see a case where, he could have deserved it. And I do think he's going to be a tough fight for Ilia when that happens. That being said, it looks like the promotion has centered around Paddy. These guys had beef years ago, long-standing, when they, I think Ilia was still a 45er. I don't know what Paddy was doing at that time in terms of his weight class, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Paddy was the one that I think years ago I would have dismissed. As you guys know, historically speaking, I've not been the biggest believer in him, but he has absolutely improved in a huge way. You could see how big he looked against Topuria. Again, I do think that is going to be something he's going to have to work out. The amount of guys that are going to be able to not overall control him for long stretches, but they're going to be able to get extra time. They're going to be able to make things work a little bit easier in those departments because of the size advantages. But Topuria versus Paddy, I think, could be a really big fight. I think it heavily favors Topuria. Paddy, though, is interesting because of his size, his improvement, his back-taking ability, his overall submission ability, his ground and pound has gotten better. Again, his submissions, particularly from guard, are excellent. Now, Charles couldn't do it. It's hard to see if Paddy can do it from guard. But certainly I respect the threat that Paddy brings. But it's amazing to see this moment in time for both of these guys. Promotionally, the biggest fight is at 55 is Ilia versus Paddy. For sure, that's the case. I don't know how big it would be, but it would be big. It'd be very big. And the rivalry there and the trash talk and the ugliness, it's just going to elevate that to a huge degree. But you want my early prediction? I think he's going to send Paddy's chin into orbit. I think he's going to whip his head around like Hellraiser. But don't know that. We'll have to see how it goes. You know, stranger things have happened. Okay. I do love that the UFC put Paddy into the cage. Whether or not you agree with him getting the title shot or not, them promoting it in that moment, Topuria talking trash, Paddy talking trash, the shove, perfect. Set that thing up, make that a pay-per-view. Let's build on this momentum. Let's build on this. The game has been treating Topuria's momentum like it's his. The thing that made Conor's rise so special, among many things, is he put the game on his back, and the game was receptive to it. And it's been more resistant to him. Again, nobody can be Conor. There's meaningful differences. But now it's in our interest as a sport to have the biggest and most interesting fights made. He's helping to create that in ways that basically nobody else can. It's in our interest to rally around that. That's what we should be doing. And I want to make one more note about this. I thought a long time ago that the Kutateladzis and the Gamrots and the Saryukians and the, you know, all these guys from Armenia and, you know, the Caucasus Mountains and the whole region, that they were going to just, you know, come in and get rid of the Topuria, excuse me, not Topurias, the Poiriers and the Gaethjes and the, you know, that generation of lightweights. And it didn't really happen. The Fizieves, I thought, was also going to be one of those guys. And it didn't really happen. Well, now it's starting to happen. Paddy's done a lot of that work. To an extent, Charles did it. But Topuria now I think represents a new threat there as well. Saryukian is still there. Now you're getting that turnover. We've seen all that turnover at 170 where all these new guys were coming up. Now, granted, Usman beat Buckley, but in general, you know what I'm talking about. Shavkat and Ian Gary and Sean Brady, all these guys, and beyond that, Jack Della, here comes Islam. Just all this new blood being pumped. We are finally getting some new blood pumped into 55. And it's not just Ilia, as I indicated. Other guys have done their work, including but not limited to Paddy. But it took a guy from 45 to come up here and just fucking plant his flag in the ground and go, it's time. It's time. One of the most special fighters I've ever had the pleasure to watch. That's who Ilia Topuria is. A legend in the making. Maybe he should have changed his name to La Leyenda. Maybe he should have. Maybe that was actually the move.